Hello everybody, James here, and it is story time. Do you know what? I was just looking at you. I just completely forgot my own intro. I was just looking at you doing a thumbs up, Dutch.
Pay attention.
Yeah,
Pay attention.
yeah, sorry about that. Story time with Dutch Mantell, episode 52. It is 52 as well. Before we get to Dutch, of course, we're going to do a couple of plugs. I've got 2 books, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the People's Champion, and Owen Hart, King of Pranks. 2 fine biographies of those 2 wrestlers written by yours truly, and Dutch has written 2 as well, The World According to Dutch and Tales from a Dirt Road. You know, we sort of brush through the books quite quickly, usually, but I want to say, if people want to know what the books, especially Dutch's, are about, they're all non-sequitur stories of 50 years in wrestling, all just some of the best stories you witnessed and saw and experienced while on the road.
Well, actually, it's not 50 years. It's actually probably 30 years.
When you wrote them, it was 40.
Well, maybe 40 years when I wrote them. You're right. But it's old-time stories that if they're not written down and preserved, they just go the way of the clouds. They will just disappear. So, and I've had just a little issue with my books lately, and I've sold actually quite a fair number of books in the last couple of months. And then, of course, when my stock gets low, you reorder. So I reordered, and I kept waiting, and then they finally told me we're on strike. So I ran out of books. But I've told the people that, you know, don't worry about it. You will get your books just late. So for those who are going to get their books late, I apologize, but I'm working on it. But I can't go to the factory and go in there and slap a few of them around to get them to come off strike. But I think it'll be ended probably in less than a week, I hear now. So, and then when my book train gets back into effect, I'll get the books right out to you.
There you go then. I know there was a writer's strike. Apparently there's a printing writer's strike as well there as well. But they will be with you soon enough. If you want them signed, you make your request at Dirty Dutchman with 2 L's at gmail.com. And also we have a t-shirt as well. You people mean nothing to me. The Continental Classic that Dutch wore. That you can get in the links under this video and in the podcast and just everywhere. You can't miss them, for God's sake.
Okay, let me announce this. I have a couple of guests lined up in the queue, as you say in the UK, in the queue. One of them is Jimmy Hart, which I am dying to talk to. And because he is entertaining, I mean, he just talks and talks and talks, and very entertaining and very likable. And another guest I have lined up recently is Val Venus.
Ooh.
And Val Venus, I had him in Puerto Rico, so I know him fairly well. And he said, anytime you want me, let me know. As you know, he has some political beliefs that people get irritated about.
We'll probably avoid them for the most part.
Yeah, I used to get irritated at him when I had him in Puerto Rico. He would talk this and this and this. And he's not a Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's a libertarian, which there is a lot of common sense into what he says. If he could get a lot more people to kind of agree with him, the country may be in better shape. But anyway, coming up, and pay attention to my Twitter account and my Instagram account, and I'll announce when they're coming up so you can tune in.
I had Val on my channel as well.
We picked up about 1,000 new subscribers.
Yeah.
Did you check that?
Yeah, we do about 1,000 or so every month. We're climbing up. We need to have that 100,000 by the end of the year, so
yes,
you can get that plaque on your wall to match with mine.
Yeah. Where did you get yours? A competing channel?
A competing channel from years ago, that's from. And then I changed the name on it, so it was mine.
Okay, how do we find out where this podcast resides in the top 100 wrestling podcasts in the world?
You don't, because no one does, apart from other podcasts don't know. Podcast numbers are incredibly hard to find out. So essentially, if you're not in the top 10, in like iTunes top 10, you don't know where you are.
Really?
Yeah.
So, but if I posted on my Twitter that we're in the top 15, and if nobody could check that, if nobody could fact check that, then into the minds of anybody who read that, they say, wow, top 15 out of 100 in the world? Mm-hmm. Well, actually, that's pretty good.
Yeah, if you can see the top 10, we're top 11. If you can see the top 15, we're probably top 16.
Top 16, right. It's whatever you can see, we're just right beyond that, and that's where we're trying to get to. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some news, Dutch. And the first thing I wrote down was today is the anniversary, as this is broadcast on Friday. Today is the anniversary of RoboCop coming to help Sting at that Capital Combat WCW pay-per-view. Any memory of this?
A little bit. Oh, it was horrible. But hey, I think that's one reason people watch wrestling is because you can tell automatically if something works and if something doesn't. And RoboCop was one of those things that just didn't quite work. And it was like, who was the guy who went through the wall and fell down?
Shockmaster?
Oh, that was one of the greatest things I have ever seen. And his helmet came off, and he was putting it back on.
Should we watch it?
If you don't know
should we watch it?
Yeah, let's watch it.
Okay, then. Okay, this was entirely unplanned. Pausing. And we're back. Sorry, that took ages. And to be honest, half of the time when I was fiddling around with this, you were still laughing at just the idea of the Shockmaster falling over. Okay, for the people that haven't seen this is Ric Flair and Sid Vicious, Robert Fuller, Sting, and Bulldog. And is that Booker T coming in? Harlem Heat are there, Booker T and Stevie Ray as well. Do you know there's a comedian called I can't remember, it was called Patrice O'Neill or something like that. He died really young, and he does 30-minute riff on this. Look at Bulldog. Really? Yeah, look at Bulldog. He's got no camera awareness. He's got his massive back to the camera. He's somehow look at that. He's look at that. Blocking everybody else.
I think they did this live.
Yeah, it was on a Clash in '93.
And nobody told them what to do, I guess. And they're introducing, there comes Flair's ballet. And they're introducing the Shockmaster, who is going to set people straight, I guess. I can't hear this commentary.
It's
all I have to say is our partner is going to shock the world because he is none other than the Shockmaster! All right. The Shockmaster!
There he goes.
Oh,
God. Oh, it's hilarious.
They've taken the commentary out of Jesse Ventura as well. His commentary is so funny.
I don't give a damn who you are.
Sid's such a pro.
Come on.
So you're the man that rules the world.
Oh.
They call me the Shockmaster.
That was Ole, wasn't it? Voicing that over with the box.
Yeah, I think it was Ole.
Get ready. Come on, you want a piece of me?
Right, so I think we need to deconstruct this a little bit more. So, one thing that I've noticed is, apart from when he falls over, when Sid starts speaking, right?
Yeah.
When Sid starts speaking, Shockmaster starts moving his arms because he thinks that's Ole. See? Sid starts speaking and then he starts doing pointing. Jesse Ventura's commentary is taken out of this, and all Jesse does is laugh his head off and then say, "We're full of spectacular entrances in WCW." Oof. But Okay, right. Let's say that Shockmaster, Fred Ottman, Tugboat, doesn't fall through the wall.
Oh.
At what point did somebody look at that and think, this is definitely going to work? Let's say the entrance just works completely fine, and let's say, listen, he's got the Stormtrooper helmet on, he's got the jeans he arrived to the arena in with the boots, he's got this jacket kind of thing. At what point was that meant to work before he fell through the wall?
I have no idea. I don't know. You know, am I still on screen or no?
Oh, yeah, you're still on screen, but I can.
Okay. But
let's put you on fully. There you go.
Whoever come up with this never actually bragged about it. The creator of this didn't say, hey, I invented the Shockmaster entrance. Conveniently, that was left out of the resume.
Oh,
that was left out of.
It was Dusty.
I never read that.
Yeah, he's admitted it. And apparently, I don't know if.
Yeah, but years later.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, but Dusty didn't invent falling through the wall.
Shotmaster perfected it, though.
Oh, he did. You know, I was with Mr. Ottman about a year ago, and I mentioned that to him, and he just laughed and said, well, yep, good times. And that was it. He didn't say anything about it. So, but I don't think that worked at all. You remember Sid when he says, he said something else too. This is much, much later. He says something like half a brain or something. He got it confused. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
We'll show that some other time, but I don't think he realized what he said. And let me just say this before we go. We brought Sid in when I was in Continental, and his real name is Sid Udi. But Sid Udi doesn't have any kind of a special connotation to it. I says, what if we give him another name? What about Sid Vicious, which is the name I stole from one of the
Sex Pistols.
And he kept that name. I guess he's had it copyrighted and patented now, so he owns it. And I thought Sid Vicious was a great wrestling name. And it actually fit him. So he came to Continental, and he was still pretty green, but he did that big man gimmick, and we was trying to teach that to him. See, part of being in a territory when you're a veteran is you got to teach the younger guys, how to do things. And most of the time, we don't go to a training facility to do it. We do it live in front of fans. And then we get in the back. And that's how I learned. We get in the back. The guy said, don't do this, and don't do this, and don't do this, and do this, and this, and this. And that's how I learned. I learned what they call OGT, on the job training. And that's the way I learned the business. So
tell me, I've got my own ideas, I'm sure, but tell me how to work the optimum big man style, because there's been a lot of big men who've tried to work like cruiserweights at times, which always looks odd.
Oh, it's crazy. I'll give you an example. Abyss, big guy, 300-pounder. But he wanted to go out there and do all these like lighter guys, like a 200-pounder. He wanted to do those spots. And I used to get pissed at him. I said, stop doing that crap. Yeah, man, but blah, 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 blah. I said, no. And I finally just had to say, listen, the next time I see you doing that, I'm going to fire you. And it was the last time he did it. I had to, and I wouldn't have fired him, but I had to tell him something. I said, you're 300 pounds. And I said, I don't want you going off your feet like a 200-pound guy would, because people know you're not going to throw a 300-pound guy around, especially when he's in the ring with a 200-pound guy. I mean, we're in a structured business, and everything is pre-planned. But you have to kind of go by the rules of gravity sometimes. And guys that do that, I mean, I guess to a certain percentage of fans, that they're a great worker. Great working does not draw money. I mean, you can go to any tumbling exhibition in the world and see great gymnastics. But I want to see somewhat of a confrontational tussle going on, and that's where the money is.
Can you understand why Ole Anderson really hated Vader doing all these high-flying, like the moonsault off the top? Or is Vader a special case? Because I remember as a kid watching Vader and thinking, that was amazing.
Yeah, but Vader, what Vader proved when he did the backflip is he's a hell of an athlete, and he was. And I don't know why you mentioned Ole, right?
Yeah. He was always trying to get Vader to tone down, so the story goes.
Well, he probably under the same thing I just talked about. He was too big to be doing that when smaller guys couldn't even do it. But sometimes he was supposed to be a heel. But when he did the backflip, what is there to hate? What is there to dislike? You got to say, damn, what an athlete. And he was. So Ole has a way of, Ole would never be in public relations. Let me say that. He was likable if you kind of understood him. He came up to me one time when I was in WCW, and he says, "What are you doing, you son of a bitch?" And that's the way he talked. I said, "I'm doing okay." And he looked at me, and he says, "You know something?" And I said, "What?" And this didn't have a really serious tone to it, because I knew he was messing around. I hoped. And he says, "You know, I can fire you." I went, "Okay." No, he said, "No, I can fire you." I said, "Okay, I agree." He said, "No, I could really fire you if I wanted to." He said, "But that Luger and that Sting, I can't fire them. But by God, I can fire you." So I said, "Okay, man, you got my vote." And then he just walked off. And that was the way Ole was. But I did go up to him one day and I said, "Ole, let me ask you something." He said, "What?" I said, "When are you going to put me out there on commentary?" He said, "Can you do commentary?" I said, "Hell yeah, I can do commentary." He said, "All right, you start next week." Just like that. Hell, if I'd have known that, I'd ask him like 2 months earlier. And he stuck me out there. And I stayed out there with Tony Schiavone, I guess, for a year and a half, maybe.
Was your contract renegotiated because you were then on commentary with WCW? Because I've heard that Jim Herd really valued the commentators more than the wrestlers, financially speaking.
I didn't get along with Herd. Let me tell you, I finally got a job with WCW, and Herd took over. And I've never told the story. And then I called down there to get my date to start, and they said, "Well, you're not starting." I said, "I'm not starting. I was supposed to start this month." Or said, "No, that's been changed." I said, "By who?" They said, "Well, by Jim Herd." I said, "Oh, I need to talk to him." Well, he's not in. And I called back every day. Call back, Jim Herd, leave a message. Jim Herd left a message. Jim Herd. I called back for about, I don't know, I guess 10 days, I guess. Finally, I went to this lawyer friend of mine, and I said, "Can you do me a favor?" He said, "What?" And I said, "Not charge me an arm and a leg." He said, "What?" I said, "I want you to write Jim Herd a letter at WCW. I want you to certify it. So they have to sign for it," which looks like that's kind of, troubling when you get a certified letter. And the lawyer wrote, "And my name is so-and-so and so-and-so, and I represent Dutch Mantell. We're asking why was he canceled out when he had a job agreement with you. And he says, if this is not honored, we will be seeking more punitive action or legal action. The phone rang the next day. The next day after they got the letter, because when they sign, you get a note too. It says they signed for the letter. And once he got it, they called me and they said, "Oh, will you start here?" And I started and lasted a year and a half. Never had a contract with them. I just had an agreement. And the agreement was, I tell you who I got the job with was Jim Barnett.
Oh, right.
Jim Barnett was there, and that's who I had the agreement with. And I guess Hart asked him, and Jim said, "Oh, yes, I told that boy he could start." That's the way he talked. "I told that boy he could start in July or something." But anyway, and the whole time I was in WCW, Hart avoided me, always avoided me. He never even said hello to me because I had forced his hand, and he didn't like that. But that's a story that I've never told, and I'm telling it first right here on this show.
I'm so pleased you mentioned Jim Herd, because I'd realised, I'd put this in the notes somewhere, that I'd never asked you about Jim Herd in the 50-odd shows that we've done so far. Mm-hmm. While you were saying that, I was writing more contracts. So this was sort of the era of guaranteed contracts in WCW, wasn't it?
They were starting them. I don't know if everybody had one. I didn't have one.
Well, that's what surprised me.
Not that I recall. I may have had one. I don't know. But I didn't put a lot of faith into it because contracts in those days did not benefit the wrestler. They benefited the company. And my first contract I signed in WWF only guaranteed me $1,500 a year. I went, and of course, you hear about, they drawing these tremendous houses and they doing this and they doing that. And so when I actually read the contract, I went, well, my God, they own me. And they did it. They owned the name. Not that I wanted the name anyway. It was Zeb Coulter. It was Uncle Zeb then, Uncle Zeb. And not that I wanted that name anyway. And it was all kind of a bunch of terms that benefited WWF and didn't benefit me at all. And after I left, this is another thing I got pissed off about. After you leave the company, you can't work anywhere else for 90 days. But then they did rule against that. That's unconstitutional or it's illegal. And it is illegal, really. Because if somebody leaves the company and for 90 days they can't work for another wrestling company, how are they going to make a living? Mm-hmm. How are they going to pay their bills?
Well, they do pay you those 90 days, don't they?
No. They pay you up to the date you leave, unless your contract expires on that. They do now. But back then, no, they didn't.
Going back to Jim Herd, because I'm fascinated with Jim Herd. The Pizza Man, because he's just such an awful boss.
Cornette hated that son of a bitch. I just hated him. He was a pizza guy who I don't even know how he got the job. I really don't.
I can tell you, maybe to a point. Apparently, he used to be a channel manager, maybe in St. Louis back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where Jim Barnett knew him from. And then he went off to not manage a Pizza Hut, but become a bigwig at Pizza Hut somewhere in the line. And then I think it was Jim Barnett who brought Jim Herd in. Correct me if I'm wrong, people, but I think that's the story. So you can blame Jimsy.
Well, he knew absolutely nothing about the pro wrestling business. He may have known a few legalities about contracts and stuff like that. But as far as knowing the wrestling business, listen, I've been in dressing rooms with guys that have been in the business for 20 years, and they still didn't know the business. I'm trying to learn the business, but yet I'm looking at a guy who's been in for 20 years. He doesn't really understand the business. I remember I was riding down the road with this guy one time, and he said, what you should do is get a gimmick. I said, get a gimmick? What do you mean? He said, I don't know, a mask or something, or do this and do that. And that's how you get ahead in this business. And I'm looking at him and I'm saying, well, why don't you get a gimmick? You've been to the business 20 years. If you've given me all this advice, why don't you have one? He just went out there as whoever he was and wrestled. So I'm saying, if you're going to give advice, live it. Don't just give it out. So I didn't put my stock in what he said anyway. Yeah, but Jim Hurt, highly, highly unqualified to be in any kind of entertainment business. But he did. What big idea did he come up with?
Oh, there were loads. The ding-dongs, the hunchbacks. There was one that never even made TV. Well, the hunchbacks never made TV. There was one called the Gangsters or something, where they had fake guns and shot them into the crowd. That lasted one match, and that was on a house show. There was Oz. Kevin Nash received a couple of the classics. There was that Spider-Man rip-off. There was the Beetlejuice rip-off. Some of the absolute biggest steaming piles of creative wrestling shit of all time. What was your favourite of the of that era of the terrible characters?
Well, who came up with that was WWF. I can't remember the name of it now. But back in those days, I guess, give me a couple more and I'll tell you.
Oh, God.
Give me the ones you just gave me.
Ding Dong. You've got it. I mean, everyone says the Ding Dongs for the worst one that made it to TV. They were the ones all in orange and they rang a bell in the corner.
I'll pick that one.
Fine.
Because anything he come up with, I mean, it was... See, he had the wrong idea about the wrestling business. Like a lot of guys, I sit in the dressing room, and these guys, they're trying to tell me about the business. They didn't even know the business. See, how many people online think they know the business? Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. But I'm not one of them. That's why even when I do a show and I'm talking about what WWE has done and where they're going, I don't know where they're going. But I know where they can go because they open a lot of doors. And the more doors you open that you can go through, the more chances you'll pick the right one, or the creative team will pick the right one. But, so, and I have seen this certain guys or tag teams on TV, and I immediately put in my head, DOA, dead on arrival. Like the latest one for me was the Maximum Male Models. And I said immediately after I see them, I said, that's dead on arrival. I don't know what you can do with these guys because nobody's going to, it was, I guess, supposed to be a comedy team, but they never got there. I mean, they wasn't even funny. So sometimes you can outthink yourself. A lot of creative teams do that and fall victim to it.
And then you've got the ding dongs. Hey, listen, Dutch, I love this podcast because I love this podcast because I haven't even asked you one single question, and we're 29 minutes in because we can just sit and chat all day long.
Well, this is what I say. The people that listen are sitting in the back seat of the car as we go down the road. Give me a good trip in England we could take from London to where that takes about 3 hours.
Oh, London to Manchester. Yeah, that's
okay.
3 hours, 3.5 hours. The way I drive, that's 1 hour 40. Christ, I know there's some story about people in wrestling who just will speed. Jeez, I've got a crappy car as well. My foot's welded to the floor because I just want to go home. But yeah,
Lawler used to do that. He would just floorboard it, and they would stop him. Of course, they'd recognize him, but since he was doing 100 miles an hour, they just couldn't let him go. And they give him a ticket, and Lawler would say, "I would file it away." I said, "Oh, what do you mean? Did you pay it?" He said, "No, I didn't pay it." He said, "Let me show you what I do with my things I file away." And he had them like in a little glove box in the middle, I think. He picked it up. He said, "Oh, here's one. Here's my life." He tore it up and threw it on the floor. He said, "That's what I do with it." Till one day he went to get his license renewed.
Ah.
And then he owed like $2,200 in fines. And you can't do that today because you can't get insurance. You can't get a license. You can't get a lot of stuff.
Okay, so I've got two questions actually. Who was the absolute worst driver who ever drove you? And also, have you ever been in a car crash?
In wrestling, no, I have not. The worst driver that I ever saw and rode with, and this could be backed up, substantiated. You like that word? Mm-hmm. It can be proven without a doubt. Tom Pritchard is the worst driver in the world. Because I used to ride with him and JBL and Tom, and we let Tom drive a couple of times. And after that, he drove like 60 miles an hour, and John would be going nuts. "Come on, let's go, speed up. What are you doing? You drive like an old man." But Tom, to his defense, he was halfway blind anyway, and he was trying to keep us alive. Let me move my mic here just a little bit.
Yeah, you need to. Yeah, there you go.
There it is. I was looking at that. I said, "Why do I have that big circle right there?" But he is probably one of the worst drivers I've ever seen.
I'll send that, Tom, as well. He'll thank you for that, yeah. I'm sure. I tell you what, before we, to be honest, we're just amusing it. Well, you're amusing me, certainly. We've got to do some news, at least, and then we're going to get to some fan questions. We'll get to as many as we can. First off is superstar Billy Graham. Eldridge Wayne Coleman, the real name, currently on life support. Doctors have suggested pulling the plug, but Wife Valerie has refused to do so, hoping for a miracle, which I'm sorry to say the superstar is absolutely going to need at this point, because it looks like there's just no real way back for him, I'm afraid. His illnesses include major infections in his skull, heart failure, diabetes, and more, and superstar's serious health woes started in the late 1980s with a string of hip injuries and operations that led to his retirement, then a kidney transplant, then liver issues in 2010 and bouts of pneumonia, among various other issues stemming most likely from his years of steroid abuse, as well as other pharmaceutical goodies, which he's been very open with, struggling with over the years. I suppose best wishes to the family, but any particular memories of the superstar? I know you've talked about driving down the road in Florida with him and Dusty, and they were talking about all the stuff they were going to do in the WWF at the time, but any other memories of Billy and what he meant to or what his contributions to the business were?
Well, his contributions to the business was he changed it to more of a show business approach. Because I think he was, I forgot where he was from, but he was a football player first. He played Canadian professional football for a while. And then he got into wrestling, and his first territory was in Los Angeles. And he went as Billy Graham. I don't know where he added the superstar, but actually he was named after the evangelist Billy Graham. Mm-hmm. So superstar Billy Graham. Then he went to Minneapolis, and I think he had such a talent to get people excited with the body, and he inspired people like Austin Idol and Jesse the Body Ventura and all those big guys who did a lot of posing. And then he went to WWF and was a big hit there. And he was but as far as his wrestling ability, see, he didn't have to wrestle. He just had to pose and beat guys up. And he actually did the big man gimmick right. He didn't take a lot of bumps either. So his hips, I don't know where his hip injuries came from. I don't think it came from wrestling that much.
No, I think it was bone degeneration from, steroid abuse and whatever else. So, yeah.
Well,
I'm probably just hitting the weights too hard. Who knows?
Maybe, but I didn't know. He wasn't remembered for a guy taking bumps or slams or backdrops or hip tosses or arm drags. He was just known for, the guy with the big arms, and he'd stand there and he'd do that. So he revolutionized the business, and Dusty Rhodes patterned himself after the Superstar because but he could talk. And here was a guy kind of backing up what he said. And when he came to the ring, it was exciting. That was the show business approach. And he changed all that. I didn't know him that well. Like I said, I made a few trips and sat in the back seat of the car and listened like the people are now, hoping to learn something. And I learned, what I actually learned from Billy was how political the game was. I think regular people have the notion that, well, if you can really work and perform, that's all you need. Well, you need more than that. You need the ability to politic in the back for yourself and maybe for some others, but primarily for yourself, and that's how you advance. Now, of course, we had other names for it back in the day. We called it, stooging in the back. But the guys were just advocating for themselves to get a shot. And there's really nothing wrong with that, except at the end, we thought, well, that guy's stooging everybody else off for what we're doing or whatever. But we noticed that the guys that advocated for themselves, they seemed to get the good spots and stay in the good spots.
When I did the podcast with Don Morocco, he always used to say, office is office and the boys are the boys. And he just, no matter what was going on in the office, he was with the boys and that was it. Was there sort of like an us and them mentality for most guys at that time?
Yeah, but it was like an unwritten rule. The office was really your enemy, actually. Even though they employed you, that was your enemy because they had the power to make you money or not make you money. So you kind of wanted to stay on their good side, but at the same time, you wanted to watch every move they made. Because every move they made, of course, to some of the conspiracy theorists like today, they had them back then too. And he made this move because of, and then they would see the steps that the booker had taken. But it was what it was, and we made the best of it.
I just one more thing on Superstar is I would love a lot of younger wrestlers today to watch Superstar because I feel like he would blow their mind because in ring-wise, pretty bad. He was not a great wrestler by any stretch of the imagination, but the persona, the interviews, the character,
the aura.
I'm not saying that, like, as an example, was it Dante Martin who did that, shattered his ankle a few weeks ago? And no one even remembers it anymore. No one talks about it anymore. But Superstar could do one slam on the floor and an interview, and people are quoting it 45 years later.
Well, you can kind of attribute that to the era because it was still new then. We didn't have everybody doing a podcast.
No.
We didn't have all the sheet writers saying everything, this, that, and the other, and trying to detail everything and figure out reasons and this and that and the other. Because the people saw it on TV, and then they were left to their own devices. Now, they got so many other places they can go and hear it. But he came along in an era where actually a slam meant something. You talk about the Dante Martin dive off the ladder, correct?
Yeah, the one that went totally wrong, and yeah, Anyway.
Well, I hear that in AEW. I don't think the agents or the producers, they're supposed to be told of that. And they had to be told because they had to set it up. But I don't know why guys do spots like that. Oh, yeah, it's impressive, but how many times are you going to do a spot like that? You won't do many before you get hurt. That was a 15-foot free fall, at least. Maybe not, but who's counting? But the fans, like you just said, the fans are going to remember that maybe 5 minutes. Now fans don't even remember it hardly at all. Oh, yeah, I remember that. But Dante Martin will remember it. And he may remember it for the rest of his life. That's why that is the greatest, probably, example of why wrestling needs to have stories. Because if you have stories, you don't need that. Stories, now you just add to the story, detract from the story, end the story, start another story. But here, that was the end of that match and the end of that story. But guys that are coming along now, and I'm going to tell any of you out there who are considering a career in pro wrestling, those bumps add up. There's an old saying in wrestling. It's a couple of things that are real: the miles and the money and the bumps. Those are real. And you take a wrong bump when you're 20, time you get to 30, you're going to be feeling it, and you'll feel it the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So I hate for it to take such an example like that to demonstrate the need for guys to do spots that are safe, that tell the story. And I mean, I don't even want to watch that. Have you ever seen Sid? We were just talking about Sid. Remember?
Yeah, and I've
Sid
never
jumping
meant
off
to.
And that leg going almost 90 degrees out.
Yeah.
I can't even watch that. And I have heard that they wanted, let's say this, Sid is not an aerial artist. He doesn't do all the high flying. First of all, I don't think he'd look stupid doing it. And he didn't want to do it. And he didn't even want to jump off. I think he was on the second rope too. I don't even think he was on the top rope when he jumped off. I think just to give the guy an axe handle or whatever he did. But when he landed, the camera was right on him. And you can still pick this up on YouTube. And his leg goes whoop and almost bends like this. It is, I mean, it hurts just to watch it. I can't watch it. And that ended his career forever. He did end up, I think, suing WCW for that injury. And I don't know what he got. I think he got a couple $1 million. But he doesn't seem to be lacking for any money now. Sid was always good with his money anyway.
Do you know why he was successful suing them? Is because he was basically strong-armed. Yeah, that was directive from, I don't know if Johnny Ace told him to do it or someone else. I've got the name Johnny Ace in my head. But they told him to do it, and he vehemently did not want to do it. And he said, well, you know, if something happens, on your head be it. And guess what? Something happened.
Something happened. Yeah, and he's told me, he said, I told him I didn't want to do that. And he said, then, and I didn't have to ask him, did it hurt? But sometimes it can hurt so bad that the area that's hurt sends a signal to the brain to cut off the pain. Did you know that?
No.
And he said, oh, it hurt like hell. And he's never been the same since.
Can you remember? Well, okay. As I say, we're just riffing here. Do you remember any other particularly gruesome injuries that happened in wrestling? Whether you were, when you were there, because this one isn't that gruesome, but I still remember this one. I think it was Trish Stratus, and she was being tipped off the top rope to the outside, and I think she posted with one arm either on the apron or on one of the turnbuckles, and basically she just ripped her shoulder straight out, dislocated her shoulder. And that one really got me. Even though it wasn't the most gruesome to look at, there's some really terrible ones out there. Do you remember any that stayed with you that you saw?
Well, I don't remember any right offhand, but I think did we show the one that the girl was going to get slammed on the table and they missed it and she fell off and both of them hit the floor?
Was it the double stomp one? The Japanese? I think it started.
It was in Japan.
Yeah, we saw that one. That wasn't too gruesome though. That just looked like it just hurt. I did have one more. It's a very famous one where Owen Hart pile drove Steve Austin. I can't look at that because his head is a good 6 inches below Owen's thighs, and there's just no way for it to go well.
Well, that to me it was a pure accident because Owen was never known for carelessness. Never. And see, that's the problem with wrestling. You get in the ring with a guy and you almost take the Hippocratic oath. Is that what's called? Do no harm.
Yep.
Do no harm. Because if I got in the ring with you and I said, we're going to do this spot. Now I'm trusting you to protect me because I'm giving you my vessel. I'm giving you my body. And when I give it to you, don't be careless and don't drop me on my head. Don't drop me on my shoulder. Don't drop me on my hip. Take care of me. Because once you get a reputation as being careless, a lot of guys don't want to work with you or they won't do certain spots with you. See, that's what I got in the ring with a lot of these green guys, muscled up guys. They look great. They could only go 5 minutes or 6 minutes because their cardio they just blow up. And they were huffing, they were puffing. Don't ask the guy to slam you when they're doing that because they're out of steam, they're out of gas. And I've had a lot of guys just they had to get out of the ring to get their breath back. Which if you had anything going in the match, it dies while the guy's outside, trying to recharge. And that's the problem with bodybuilders in wrestling. They don't have any cardio. You take a little skinny guy and he can go all day. You take a big muscled up guy and he goes.
Going back on what we said before, injuries, we're going to go on to the second bit of news. Randy Orton possibly retiring for good. Now, I think this has been slightly misquoted. From Sportskeeda, in fact, Bill Apter interviewed Bob Orton Jr. and Bob said Randy's training. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if he feels like he's ready to get back. I think he might, but again, he's pretty well taken care of, I believe he means financially. I don't think he needs to go back to WWE. I think the doctors have told him not to, but Randy will do what Randy wants to do. Now, he's not been seen since May 20th of the year before. He has since had spinal fusion surgery. Do you think Randy's coming back?
Well, now that I've heard this, and I read this earlier, I don't think he'll come back.
Really?
And this is the reason, because I think that WWE, they're aware of all these injuries. And if he's going to have to go through so many tests, they're going to send him to Pittsburgh or wherever they send him. And he's got to go through a complete physical. And his physical won't include his heart rate and breathing and all that. It's structure, bone structure, and x-rays, and they're going to study his body. Because if there's something there that's going to be weak, they're going to find it. And I don't think he might not even be able to get cleared to come back. Yeah, but I think it would be a great addition to WWE if he did come back, because now here's a legend, and Randy Orton is what I call a true legend in WWE. If he came back, hang on a minute, what is that?
Pausing.
Well, when they bring him back, I mean, people still remember him recently. I don't know how long it's been since he's been gone.
Yeah.
But, okay. But if they brought him back, he would mean something. And I think Randy Orton is one of those guys. If you had a top 10 in WWE, I think he would be inside that top 10.
So big fan then. Do you think it's going to be a similar thing like Bryan Danielson, where he for years was trying to get back into WWE, actually wrestling in the ring, and WWE was trying to find any reason to not let him back in the ring just for his own health? Do you think they'll pull the same thing with Randy and just sort of like refuse to let him wrestle but keep him under contract?
Well, that was under a different regime. I think that was under the total Vince regime. Now, I think Vince is back. I don't know at what depth he would be listed at. I think he does have still some sway over the creative team, because I've watched the TV and there's some segments that are just clunky. And that is not, I don't think that's indicative of how Triple H books, but it does have like Vince's fingerprints on them. Nothing that's really that bad, but just stuff that are boring. So I think this will be a Triple H decision, whether he comes back or not. They're friends, they're buddies. That may have something to play into it, but it's up to the doctors, I think, right now, whether they clear him or not.
Just one more thing about Randy. He's suffered, or he claims he suffered from hypermobility, which is why he has suffered quite a few injuries beforehand. The most famous one is when he was preparing to do an RKO, and he was doing that, slithering on the ground, then he starts punching the ring, and then he goes bang, bang, and then it's just shoulder go. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Some people get injured off the weirdest things.
Mm-hmm. I do remember that. What's he called that? Mobility? Or
hypermobility, yeah.
What's that mean?
Just hypermobile. I don't know. Maybe he's like extra flexible or something like that.
I don't know. I've never heard that word before.
Well,
anyway.
We'll leave that there then.
But if we see him back, we see him back. I would like for him to come back for one final run and see where they go with it.
But if you were a betting man, you'd say we probably won't be.
Well, I don't bet, because I always lose.
Give us a percentage then. Give us a percentage. More likely he will, or more likely he won't?
I think it's more likely he won't. That's what I think.
Okay, we'll move.
But if he did, that's money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Tony Khan's 400th big announcement since he started AEW, but it's actually a big announcement this time for once. Now, this story may age like a fine milk by the time this by the time this podcast comes out, because we're recording this Wednesday afternoon. The Dynamite, where the actual announcement happening, is a few hours away. But what we believe the announcement will be, or what everyone is suspecting it is the announcement of AEW's third show, which is going to be called Collision, and it's going to be on Saturday nights, and CM Punk is going to return on that Collision show whenever it happens in June. I think it's June anyway. So it also looks like Tony is splitting the rosters, because I don't know. I don't know why he's splitting the rosters. It doesn't really. No one's happy WWE's doing it, so maybe Tony's doing it. But is it just to keep Punk and the EVPs away? That seems rather extreme.
Well, I read. Somebody said, "Where'd you read it?" Well, I wrote it down. I read it back to myself. I read that they had like 163 talents under that they've signed agreements, not necessarily contracts. But he's got 163, and I don't know why you would need 163 talents. But he certainly, it's about time that he had a different, a branch off somewhere. The Ring of Honor thing he took over, is that Collision or no?
No, Ring of Honor is going to be Ring of Honor, and that will remain on the Ring of Honor over-the-top streaming service that's subscribed to about 10,000 people. So Ring of Honor is just away on the sidelines.
But he's stocking that.
Yeah, he's keeping it. No, yeah.
Okay, but Ring of Honor is Ring of Honor. They're kind of separate from AEW.
Yes.
Collision will be an AEW show.
Yes.
Okay, what's going to happen to Rampage?
So Rampage, what we believe at this time, as I say, this could all turn out to be nonsense in a few hours, is it's now going to... Right, so AEW had 2 shows that was YouTube only, Dark and the other one. I've forgotten the name. Elevation. And so apparently all those people who only seem to ever appear on Dark and Elevation, all these new names, all these names that just never appear on the main shows, are now going to be on Rampage. And I suppose my question is you watch Rampage every week. Rampage is dead as an entity, so I suppose you might as well just fill it with... Only the hardcores watch it, so you might as well fill it with a roster full of people that only the hardcores would watch either way. Or it's almost like an NXT developmental thing that they're doing with it now, it seems.
Well, Rampage is not the most exciting show. It used to be a lot better, but now they have one match on there, which is okay, but the matches go. See, what I notice about AEW, the matches go, they cut out the entrances, and the match might go 15 minutes, which is okay if you got the talent in there that can do it. See, WWE, they may have a match over in 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and they're gone to commercial, and they're bringing that next match out there. They're rolling. I didn't say it was exciting, but they're moving. AEW will break in the middle of a match. And this is what I hate to do. They put picture inside, what's it called?
Picture in picture.
Picture in picture. And you can see what's going on, but you can't hear the commentary, which makes me realize, hell, you need commentary on some of this stuff to brighten it up. But Rampage is, and they do use some good talent on Rampage. But this is what happens to me. I come from SmackDown with the big screen over the entrance and the bright lights and the spotlights and the crowds. And then I go to Rampage with it looks like one ring light with like 100-watt bulb over the ring. It's more than that, quite naturally. But it looks so dark. It cannot match the production qualities of WWE. And to get the qualities that WWE has to have, I mean, it takes a ton of money. I think I heard 10 years ago that the lighting for just Raw or SmackDown, the lighting to put in $60,000 just for the lighting. And I'm thinking $60,000. And say they went to Madison Square Garden, and this is 20 years ago, so probably more than 30 years ago. You know what it cost to rent the Garden back in those days?
No.
$130,000 just to rent the Garden. There's no telling what it is now. It may be 400,000, maybe more.
It's a loss leader, essentially. You go there for the prestige. You do not go there to make money. Unless you're like boxing or something, you can charge, thousands for a floor seat.
Well, WWE used to go there like once a month and once every 6 weeks. They would draw a big house. But I was there one time, and this is when WWE brought in some gimmick guys. They brought in a Dirty White Boy as somebody.
T.L. Hopper, the wrestling plumber.
Oh, T.L. Hopper and something else. I went in, and we was at the Garden. We had a show there. It had, I swear, about 5,000 people there. It looked like you could walk out to ringside, chamber around in a double-barrel shotgun, and shoot it off at the top deck and not hit anybody. It looked at with 5,000 people in the building. it looked empty. And it's really, I mean, I've been in a lot of empty buildings in the wrestling business, but not buildings that cost like $100,000. But Madison Square Garden is the arena of the world. That's where people go to be seen, to make a name, but
to lose money, anyway. Apparently as well.
Oh, you can lose a lot of money there. The big concerts do well, and now WWE, I don't know what they were thinking when they put all those. The main event must have been bad. It was one of their down times anyway. And I think they signed so many at the first of the year. They signed like they're going to be in the building like 8 times in a year. And it may have been one of those dates they couldn't get out of because they certainly didn't have the card to go in there at that time. It bombed, big time bombed. Was
that the first time you were in Madison Square? Tell me about the first time you were in Madison Square Garden. Did you get the fizz, the feeling in your stomach that you were somewhere special? Or were you just, 9 days into an 11-day run and you were just tired?
No. I was excited to be there. I'd never been there before. But most people have the feeling going through the front gate when they buy the tickets and all. I went through the back gate. That's like slipping in the back door. And you go into this. Sometimes you can park in a parking lot. You pay to park in there. And then you got to walk across the street, all the fans all around you. But they weren't threatening or anything. They needed to threaten me with I was going to get fired or something, not because they didn't like me. And then you go in the back way, or you can go into the probably inside the building parking lot, but you got to have a special pass. That's where Vince goes. That's where the booker goes, the agents go. They go inside the back. They park inside the building in a parking lot. And I walked across the street, walked in, and you walk through the back, and you can see the arena, but the dressing rooms were very small. I'm thinking, this wasn't as big as I thought it was. And now I've seen now where they've expanded it a little bit. Now we may have had just a space kind of roped off for us or slotted for us. But it wasn't very big. So, and I was there the night they did the infamous hug.
Mm-hmm.
It was Nash and Hall and Triple H and
Shawn Michaels.
And I'm standing there, and I didn't know they were going to do this. I'm standing there. It was a curtain call.
Mm-hmm.
But the curtain was sold out. All the wrestlers apparently knew what they were going to do, except me and except Vince. So they have this match, and I'm watching, and the match ends. And I think it was it Triple H and Shawn, or was it Hall and Shawn? It was a single match. But anyway, the match ended. Shawn wins. Everybody's happy. And then they go and they do the big hug. And I go, what the hell? And I'm watching Vince. He hadn't made any. I bet Vince was 6 feet from me, 8 feet, not far. And then all of a sudden out comes Triple H and out comes Nash. And they all get in a ring and they all do the big hug. But the crowd, they didn't seem to react. They kind of cheered a little bit, but nobody understood it. Then they came in the back and they all went into Vince's office. And then I heard some banging and throwing shit around, and Vince didn't like that. So, but anyway, Hall and Nash were leaving, and he wanted to punish them, but Hall and Nash were leaving, so he couldn't do anything to them. Triple H and Shawn were staying. He couldn't punish Shawn because Shawn was the champion. You know who got punished?
Mm-hmm.
Triple H.
Mm-hmm.
And he got punished for about, I don't know, months, at least 6 months. Every night he was flat on his back in the middle of the ring.
And do you know who was wrestling for most of that?
Jake.
Was it Jake? I was going to say a different name.
Who was you going to say?
Mark Mero.
Okay.
Yeah, he was Mark Mero, not Johnny B. Bad. But yeah, Mark Mero beat him flat as a pancake nearly every night for months.
Every night. Well, whoever he was against beat him. I remember one night Jake beat him. I forgot where we were. We were somewhere in New York. So, and I'm up high in the rafters. I'm peeking down like that. Jake beats him. You know, Jake has the deal where he gets the snake. And I'm thinking, oh, God. But to Triple H's defense, he did not resist. He went out every night and he busted his ass and he laid there for that slimy ass snake to crawl all over him. With me, I'd have been okay with the match, but when he got to the snake, I got to draw the curtain there. I'd be gone.
You're not a fan of snakes, then, it seems.
No, I hate snakes.
Okay.
Most people I know, they hate snakes.
You get many of them in Florida? I mean, I presume you do.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, all over the South, you got snakes. Texas, you know, in the southern part of the United States, a lot of snakes.
Never seen a snake in my life.
Really?
So few. Oh, no, I mean, of like pet snakes. I've held snakes and everything. I'm fine with snakes. But in the wild...
But you don't...
No.
So in the UK, you don't have snakes?
We have a few, like a couple of breeds of grass snake. There is one poisonous snake called an adder. And I think the last death from an adder bite was so many years ago that I can't remember if it was 100 years ago or something. You just don't see them. No, I don't know. I know one person who's seen a snake in real life. That's it. In the wild, I should say.
You need to get out more.
Well, look for the snakes.
What's your next question here? Let's keep it rolling.
Going back on Tony Khan's big announcement, as said before, it seems that there's going to be maybe not a draft, but a roster split to keep CM Punk on Collision and maybe Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks on Dynamite. And my question was, wasn't there some sort of saying in wrestling that you never hated somebody bad enough to not make money with them? But apparently that doesn't exist anymore in this day and age. You can hate somebody that much.
Oh, yeah. I've seen a lot of guys hate each other, but they would go out every night because they were making money and they'd work with each other. Apparently in AEW, they've broken that. And now if you just hate somebody, they just don't work together anymore. But I think now if they did work together, they would be, I mean, Tony could force them to work if he wanted to. And that's what I'm saying. He needs to step up and be a boss. Why would he leave money laying on the table? It's been, what, six to 8 months since this happened?
September, so 8 months, yeah.
Okay. Get over it, guys. I mean, we're all adults here. We're not like kindergartners. And kindergartners would have forgotten it by now and went about their business.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this, actually, Dutch. So, right, as one of the greatest living bookers in the wrestling business, how would you deal with this? Let's say you eventually get Punk and the EVPs in the same room talking again. They finally agree to do a match. How would you do that to best generate income? Would it be a slow build? Would you, I don't know, like one invade the other company or whatever? How would you do it?
Well, if I'm starting a new show and CM Punk's on there kind of by himself, I just have one of them invade the show and take it over.
First day?
No, not the first day. I would have to say that I would put it out on social media now that we have that it's not forgotten. We're not going to forget this. Then third week, fourth weekend, see how it's doing. Then do that. Then take him out, and show him police escorting him out. Maybe even put him in a car and arrest him because he had no business being there. Now that he has attention, he has the press now saying that, CM Punk thinks he won. Well, he didn't win. and go from there. And then work it up to where they come face to face. They have a big pull apart, then take it, and then finally go to a pay-per-view with it.
With the arresting
shouldn't be hard to book it.
With the arresting thing, I don't know if I'm just stealing this with Steve Austin, but you don't arrest him the first time, you arrest him on the second time. Because the first time you attack, and then you have so many weeks in between, replaying it and talking about it and saying something to the effect of, if you come here again, let's say if Kenny's going over to Collision to attack CM Punk, you will be arrested. And then you can have weeks of where he's threatening to do it, or he's not got caught, and man, you could spin that out for
That's what I'm saying. It kind of writes itself. So you can pick the flow of it as you want, or as you feel it should go, and go from there. But I do think there's still money in that, because it's something happened that didn't look like it was supposed to happen. And that's where you get the people, because you get them in that never, never land. Is this real, or is it sketched out? So if you get them there, and believe me, it's easy to get people to make stuff look real. Use real cops, really arrest the guy. I mean, then they have a record of it. Then of all the dirt sheet writers, they want to go, and they said, no, they arrested the guy. It's on record. So, but I think that's the way I would book it.
And I think you'd be right to as well. Right, we are finally going to ask some fan questions. I must say, you know how rigidly I script these things, and that we never jump off the script or anything. But even for us, we've got over 2 pages of fan questions. So I'm going to ask as many as I can, and the first one's sort of a video question as well. But Kevin Newsom, how? Hey Dutch, I grew up watching Memphis Wrestling and was wondering if you have any stories or insights on the art of throwing fire during a match. Thanks, and love your channel.
Well, I never threw fire. I never wanted to throw fire. Lawler, of course, he stole it from the Sheik, but it's just a magic guys use it. You just have a little lighter and you let it go. I've never thrown it, but I've had it thrown at me, and I didn't much appreciate that. But
you've got to tell that story then. How did the mustache not go?
Well, yeah, but see, I got to watch, because if it hits here, if it does flame up, everything is singed, not burn off, but singed, and which is, you ever smell singed hair?
Yeah,
it's horrible.
You get like an involuntary, was it like a Turkish shave where they do it with fire?
Well, a lot of them wanted to throw fire at me one night. I said, nah, I don't think so. Well, what I did, I think I had a cup of water out there. A fan had something, and I took it and threw it in my face. Then I got back in the ring. Then he threw it. Now I'm wet. So, but I can always say I knew what he was going to do. But one time I think the Sheik was going to throw fire on Lawler. Lawler's telling me this story. So there was one guy holding Lawler here and one guy holding here, and Lawler told the Sheik, "Okay, throw the fire." "Okay, Jerry. Okay." It wasn't light. It wasn't light. It wasn't light. And he said, "Jesus Christ, Jerry, the fucking lighter never work." There was no fire, so they just kept beating him up. Oh, it was horrible. The lighter never work. I
always found it weird that Jerry Lawler threw fire in the first place, because it's like, I thought it was meant to be like some mystic Eastern fireball thing, and then all of a sudden Memphis' own Jerry Lawler can do it.
Yeah, he was. Of course, like I said, he stole it.
He just liked
somebody else did. Yeah, he liked it and wanted to do it. So, and he didn't use it that much, but which was actually benefited the fire, because if you don't use it much, now if it's not used that much, you don't wear it out. Mm-hmm. It's like the super kick. The super kick looks great And if it was used for a finish, people would scream. But now after they see 10 or 12 of a Young Bucks match, they see that many super kicks, and they do them great. They just do them too much. Mm-hmm. But hey, that's my opinion. I mean, they can do what they want to do.
Now, we'll leave the video thing. We haven't got time. We'll have to watch videos of people setting themselves on fire another time, sadly. And you know what the video is as well, but we'll watch it another time. The wrestling super nerd. Have you ever been on a plane when a super heavyweight wrestler was taking a shit? How do they do it? The fans must know.
Oh, my God. Well, they can't get in there. They cannot get in that little laboratory. Now, I heard one time that Yokozuna had to go to the toilet on a plane, and they took some wrestlers to kind of block off the back. Now, I wasn't on the plane, but I'm thinking, there's no way he could get in there. There is no way. Unless he actually did the dirty deed in the little galley space they had. But there's no way he could get in there. I mean, you take a guy at 250 pounds, he didn't fit in it that well. He'll get in there, but a guy like Yokozuna, he couldn't get through the door. So what I would say, a big guy like that taking a poo-poo on an airplane, I'd go to the back. I'd go to the front of the plane. If he's in the back, I'd go to the front. If he was in the front, I'd go to the back. I don't want to be around it.
We'll move on. Earl. Hi, Dutch. I was talking to James, and I have an interesting question that I have never heard any wrestler speak about. Sometimes when you see a documentary, they will put a map, and that map will show each state and the territories that work those states. In every map, I always see about 4 states that are empty: Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona. My question is, was anything going on in these states? Why was there no territory? Can you please elaborate the best you can what happened here, or what was going on in these states, if anything? Thank you.
Nothing was going on in those states.
Why not?
I don't think the population would support it. And they were like long distances between towns. That's what I think. Now, they have had a couple in Arizona. One was by a guy named either Mohammed or Abdullah, or one of them, but not the Abdullah we're talking about. He had, I think his name was Ernie Mohammed, maybe. I don't know. He didn't last long. And Buddy Fuller. Remember, I've told you about Robert Fuller and Ron Fuller. Buddy Fuller had one out there one time. And if Buddy Fuller can't get it to work, I don't think nobody can get it to work. And I don't know how long he was out there. I don't think long, maybe 6 months, 9 months, had a territory. But it couldn't support a regular territory for you to stock it with 12 to 14 or 16 guys. I don't think it could support that much personnel. Now, those towns were usually run by excuse me. Those towns were usually run by bigger organizations like AWA or Dallas or maybe WCW, or I don't think WWE has many shows in that area either. Now, WCW, I remember going through there, but the houses, they weren't that good. So I think it was unsustainable to have a territory there. And that's why we didn't see any.
Tom from Atlanta. Did Dutch ever have the chance to meet or even wrestle against Lou Thesz? And if they only met, any insights Dutch can share regarding, as my grandfather called him, Sweet Lou? Thanks for all the memories and recollections.
Yeah, I met Lou. I never wrestled him, but I was in a territory. He would come through, and he would come through like he would book himself in, or the promoter would book him in for like a week, 2 weeks. And sometimes I'd make trips with him and I was trying to get to know, but he's not that big of a talker. Nice guy, and I would try to get him to talk about the days gone by, and he would talk a little bit, but nothing that I remember that really stood out in my head.
He's got a reputation as one of the toughest guys ever in the industry. Were there any stories about Lou that permeated the dressing room back then?
Well, it was generally accepted that, if you messed around with him, and Lou was traveling around then. He was kind of an older guy. He may be in his late 50s, but he was still slim and in shape with a bald head. And you look at him and you think, well, you don't look that intimidating till you found out that when he put you down and got you in that sugar hold that you couldn't move and he could choke you out, then you kind of got an example of what he really knew. He was a tough guy.
How big of a draw was he? So I'm presuming you're talking about the era maybe in the 70s when you were a lot younger in the business, when you were traveling with him. But how big of a draw was he if he was with whatever the territory was for a week or two?
Well, he was a world champion at one time. And I guess he drew... How long was he champion?
Oh, God, don't ask me. I think I don't even know the last time he was champion. Maybe until the early '60s, maybe. I think he was champion when he was 50 or around then. I'll check. You carry on, or do you want me to pause?
Okay. Well, when he came in later, he wasn't that big of a draw. The house may have got a little bigger, but he wasn't like where I was. I mean, I don't think they used the world champion that much. May not even recognize him as world champion. It's not like Flair in the days when they recognized him like nationally as the world champion. So when Lou Thesz come in, it's according to who he came in against, but I don't remember him popping any big houses just by him coming in.
So the last one I've got here is Lou Thesz last won the NWA World title January 24th, 1963. And then there's the Buddy Rogers controversy. And then he lost it to Gene Kiniski January 7th, 1966. So he held it over 1,000 days.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But I don't remember Gene. I never met Gene Kiniski. Never met him. Because wherever I was, I don't guess they used him much. I remember Briscoe as the champion. This is when I really start remembering it. Briscoe as the champion. And then I think Terry Funk followed him.
Oh, God. I was just looking at Gene Kiniski then. I think it's because Gene Kiniski was more Canadian-based. So I know.
But the it was NWA back in those days.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And whether he was based in Canada or not shouldn't have any influence on the NWA. NWA, of course, he was used in St. Louis a lot, Chicago a lot, maybe Houston a lot.
Well, I'll tell you,
those are outlier towns. They didn't depend on any one territory to stock their cards. They would bring in who they wanted. It was almost like an independent show within the NWA.
I'll give you the next few. Gene Kiniski then lost to Dory in 69, then Harley in 73, Jack Briscoe in 73, Giant Baba for a week in 74, Jack Briscoe again 74, Terry Funk 75, Harley Race 77, Dusty Rhodes 79, Harley Race 79, Giant Baba again 79, Harley, and then Giant Baba a third time. I didn't realize Giant Baba had won so many times. Anyway, I think
but
he paid for it, didn't he?
Giant Baba?
Yeah, he didn't he pay for
They all paid for it. I mean, somebody did. But I was reading, and I didn't even know this at the time. I was there the night that Jack Briscoe lost it to Terry Funk in Miami, right? In Miami, right?
Oh, I think you might be right. Bear with me. What year are we talking? So who lost to who?
75.
Jack Briscoe loses to Terry Funk December the 10th, 1975 in Miami Beach, Florida.
I was there.
Was it good?
Didn't even know it.
All right. So did you go home early?
No, they kayfabe me. No, I stayed to the end, but I had to because I forgot who I rode with. I think I rode with one of the referees or something.
I was going to say, if it was Jack, then you would have to wait.
And I'm gonna tell you how inquisitive I was. We got in the car, and it was just like business as usual, you know. And I never even, the ref never even brought it up. You know, we switched the belts tonight. It's just like, well, find us a 7-Eleven and let's get us something to drink and let's head home. And I didn't know about it actually till the next day, because it was supposed to be Jack Briscoe versus somebody in Jacksonville. Miami was a Wednesday. Thursdays was Jacksonville. Now, between those two towns is about probably 550 miles between those two towns. So we would drive back to Tampa, where we all kind of located. That was the head base. And then head to, like, Miami was like 270 miles south. Back to Tampa, that's over 500 miles in one day. The next day, we'd go up to north, 220 miles or 230 miles, and then head back south. Florida had some trips, but you were home every night. So if you got used to driving and traveling, it wasn't bad. But I was there the night that Briscoe lost it to Terry Funk.
Yeah, and it made a huge impression on you. We'll move on then. Big Dave says, do you remember the locker room reaction after Jim Ross got fired from WWE in the summer of 2013? Ross was hosting a panel of WWE legends for the latest 2K game, but an inebriated Ric Flair kept rambling on and interrupting everybody else to the point that the entire evening fell off the rails somewhat. How beloved or otherwise was Jim Ross with the boys? And also a reaction to when he got fired. You were with the company at the time.
I was. Well, it's like anything else. You get hired to get fired. You're like football coaches. And I think when the thing with Flair happened, I think they kind of soured on Jim, I think, maybe. And Vince he's hot and cold on people. And that's what upsets me about Flair. Flair has so much respect for this business that he will go out there on a interview like that where it's talking about an important subject that wrestling fans want to hear, and he's drunk on his ass, and he's showing his ass, and that's where I've lost respect for Rick. Of course, I never had a lot for him anyway, because I've heard all the stories, all the years about him, and most of the stuff you hear about him has some truth in it. He won't admit it, but Jim Ross losing his job, I think that may have played a part in it. I'm not sure.
Sometimes I always wonder if Vince was just looking for an excuse. Let me just actually defend Flair slightly.
That's what he does. He looks for. He wanted to move him, so it's happened. Okay, now we got that as an excuse because he couldn't keep control over his own interview. So let's finish him up.
I'm going to defend Flair slightly here because I think this was very shortly after Reed had died. And to be honest, it may have been quite very soon afterwards. So, I mean, he probably wasn't... I mean, all the other times he showed up drunk, I suppose, sort of go against that. But I think he was cut a bit of slack because Reed had died like a week or two beforehand.
Then Jim Ross should not have even had him do the interview then.
Maybe.
I mean, because if his mind is somewhere else on a tragedy, and that was certainly a tragedy, if he thinks that would affect Rick in doing this interview, then he shouldn't ask him on. Well, now, when he went on and he showed that he was inebriated, he was drunk, then we need to stop it and take him off and continue without him.
this was I believe Steve Austin was on, and Mick Foley was there, and Daniel Bryan. So it was like a big old panel. I think Dolph Ziggler was there, in fact, as well. I don't know if you can speak to this with any confidence, but do you, the sort of relationship between Jim Ross and Vince McMahon over the years, because I know you were there in the mid-90s when Jim Ross actually came back from his first firing from 94. Have you any inside information on just the contentious or otherwise relationship between Jim and Vince?
Well, I asked Jim one time about my bookings. I says, why am I here and here, but I'm not here and here? And he went, well, pal, that's Vince. That's all I can tell you. I says, but there's got to be a reason. And he says, take it up with Vince. And he didn't know the reason. I didn't know the reason. I forgot what it was, but he says, hey, that's Vince, Pally. You got to take it up with him. He just passed it right to Vince, which is probably where it should have gone from the beginning. But trying to talk to Vince back in those days, he had 1,000 people trying to get a word with him. The production people and the agents and the announcers. And so if you tried to get in there and see him, you had to get in line. So I thought I would bypass that and go to Jim, and still didn't get an answer.
Does Jim just love punishments in a sense? Go on.
You remember when Vince was doing the Kiss My Ass Club?
Yes, very. Jim had his face right in there, didn't he?
My God. And I'm watching that. And listen, I'm in the business, but I'm thinking, that's some humiliating stuff to have to do that. But Jim, on the other hand, he either did it or he'd lose his job. And I could never do that as a boss. I could never say, you got to do it or I'm going to fire you. But Vince, on the other hand, probably he didn't have such a high moral compass like I did. And he got Jim Ross's head. We need to show that.
What now?
Not now, but okay. we need to come out with a total bot show or things you've never seen.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Are you seen, but you've forgotten? We need to bring it back up.
I've got to ask this as well about Jim. Is he a glutton for punishment because he's worked for Bill Watts, he's worked for Jim Herd, then he's worked under Vince for so many years, all directly, all as like subordinates directly under them. Man, does he just love just working for like the hardest taskmasters in the business?
Well, I don't know if he's a glutton for punishment, but he was a good announcer and he loved wrestling. And I don't think Bill would get on him that bad, Bill Watts. And I've heard Watts pitch some ungodly bitches. He'd throw stuff and stomp and blow around. And Jim just sit back and let him go through it. Unless he was, and I never heard him personally say anything to Jim. Jim Herd probably wasn't that bad because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Jim Ross actually said he's probably the only person who ever liked Jim Herd.
Yes, because Jim Herd would listen to him. Jim Herd actually was a mark for Jim Ross and thought Jim Ross knew what he was talking about.
Really? Well, I mean, Jim does know what he's talking about, but I didn't think Jim Herd deferred to anybody.
Well, I don't think he would discount what Jim Ross would tell him. And I know Jim, if Herd came in and Jim would try to talk to him. But he would try to talk to him in a way that wasn't sucking up, but trying to help him. So Jim Herd, he may have liked Jim and Jim may have liked Jim Herd. Who knows?
Just one more thing before I just ask one or two more questions.
Yeah, but what about Jim Ross around Ole Anderson?
Go on. I don't know this.
God. I never heard anything going on in the back, but I've seen Ole in one of his rages. I wish I'd have filmed that, and I wish I had it for Twitter right now. Hilarious. Because he not only did he pitch a bitch, he had great commentary along with it. And Ole was a talker, and he could talk shit. But he would talk, if he wasn't talking to you, he was really funny when he was doing it to other people. Because he never talked to me that way anyway. I think Ole kind of liked me in some strange way because I didn't bother him that much, I guess. But
when he was not threatening to fire you.
Yeah, well, he was kidding there because I didn't get fired. He had to be kidding, and he was just having one of his comical moments. But I never heard him get on Jim Ross, and if he had, I wish I'd have heard it.
I'm going to ask two more, and then we will shut down this podcast. I know you always criticize. So you always ask for more.
How long have we gone so far?
1:30. So generally these podcasts are going 1:40 at the moment.
Son of my bitch. Go ahead.
Gina G.
How's this? You didn't tell me how my mustache looks today.
I always say beforehand? I do the quote as was it? Girl bait, sir. Pure bloody girl bait. You'll be combing women out of your mustache for weeks.
Stop it.
It's looking very nice. Have you got any wax in there? We're not sponsored by any wax companies.
No, we need to be sponsored by wax or something. Yes, I do.
Oh, I know someone to email.
I got it right here.
Yep.
I'm not going to show you the top. I'm just going to show you the back of it. That's it.
There you go. See back of mustache box owner. If you want to have the front shown, then you got to pay us. Gina G. Hello to Dutch and James. Did you ever see someone get thrown out of a locker room for being a rookie or not following the wrestler's code or somehow disrespecting a veteran? Also, do you remember any of the wrestlers caught in the mid-90s in the WWF? If so, who was in the dock, who was prosecuting, defending, and who was the judge? What was the punishment handed down? So we'll take the locker room bit first. Do you remember anyone getting thrown out for any reason from the locker room?
Enzo.
Okay.
He got thrown out, but I wasn't there. I just had gone. He got thrown out for running his mouth, I think, because he had come up from NXT and he had a mouth on him. And I think they put him out in the hallway, made him dress out in the hallway, which is a bad place to dress because where are you going to leave your wallet? Where are you going to leave your watch? Where are you going to leave your rings? In the hallway? Everybody comes through the hallway. So unless you want to stash all that stuff on you when you go to the ring, you may come back to nothing. And that has been known to happen in wrestling's dressing rooms. Where you got to really watch, though, is independent dressing rooms. Mm-hmm. Because when I go into the independent dressing room, I don't do it anymore. You don't know any of those guys in there. Hell, one guy may have killed his wife and family and then come down to wrestle that night. He may have been a damn mass murderer. You didn't know. Or he could have robbed a 7-Eleven, shot a guy, and come in. So you got to watch when you go in there, and you don't know who is friends with who. You got to watch. Or who's mad at who, so a fight could break out. You're the last one to know. So when I would go into an independent show, I'd go to the back in the corner and I'd sit down where the whole dressing room was in front of me. So if there was some trouble down there, I could see it. Or if there was some trouble over here, I could hear it. So I watched what I did. But Enzo was the only one that I can recall that got thrown out of dressing rooms.
Now, the other half of the question is wrestlers caught in the mid-90s WWF. Now, of course, you are the inventor of wrestlers caught, for people who are in the know. Originally, I'll fill in the blanks and then we'll move on to the question. You originally invented it just to persecute The Undertaker constantly for romancing whatever girl happened to be in that town or for turning up 4 seconds late or whatever it might have been. But in the WWF in the mid-90s, it became somewhat of a bigger thing, I believe. Who were I'm presuming Undertaker was the judge and prosecutor. But who were the judges, prosecutors, defendants, and who would find themselves in the dock in the WWF in the mid-90s?
Who did they put on? The Undertaker was the judge. The prosecutor was JBL. And the defendant was whoever they didn't like that week. And they would call it all together before everybody, like when everybody finished their afternoon stuff, they call it right before the show started. And it took about 30 minutes, and they would draw a pretty sizable crowd. And they would call witnesses. And I can't remember who they tried, but they have done several and convicted them, because it is somewhat of a kangaroo court. They're going to be convicted. And the deal was, if you were called in front of wrestlers court, I think JBL would issue a subpoena, an actual subpoena. You're hereby ordered to appear, blah, blah, blah. And then they would pick a little bit of a jury, I think, or maybe it was a judge's decision. And I forgot, one of the things is not paying a bar bill, or mooching off somebody, or letting somebody else buy drinks, and you're not paying. But the whole intent was, it was not necessary to bring attention to it. But it was to embarrass the guy. And if the guy got too belligerent, well, judge would hit his gavel, and they would just render the verdict right then. And some of it was financial, and some of it was, more humiliating. Like he would have to pick up some guy's dirty clothes or something. But that is a case where this prosecutor, this JBL guy, Justin Bradshaw, never lost a case. And Undertaker was called the hanging judge. So
now there's certain stories I've heard where, to butter up the judge, the Undertaker, you might take him a bottle of Jack or get JBL a case of beer beforehand, so the punishment might not be as bad. Is that something that ever happened?
Well, I'm not at liberty to say. Oh, I'm sure it happened. But I think JBL, if he got a case of beer, he'd just say, well, I can't admit it. It can't affect this case. And he'd convict the guy anyway. I need to ask him that. Hey, we need to have him as a guest.
I think we should. I was going to just suggest the same thing. We should definitely have John on. I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to get out of here. Harry asks, why do you think Bryan Adams, a.k.a. the Night Stalker, a.k.a. Adam Bomb, never seemed to have a major run in the business? He was huge and looked great.
First rule in wrestling: you can go into any gym in any city in the United States and pick out the guy that looks the best and put him in a wrestling outfit, won't draw you a dime, even if he's been trained. Adam Bomb just didn't have what they call it. He didn't have it. That's why, as a booker, when I'd have a new guy, and I would send him to the ring, and I'd stand in the back, and I'd see what kind of reaction he got. Hell, the guy might not weigh but 180 pounds. I don't care. If the people got up and he elicited a response from the people who bought tickets, what are they standing up for? They're standing up because they want to, not because it's just some guy. There's something about this guy that they notice. The Adam Bomb, he was like the, prototype of just a big guy. He had big arms, but he wasn't really cut up. He was just big, and you could tell he spends time in the gym, but he didn't elicit any kind of response from the fans, not even with the gimmick, I didn't think. I mean, he had a good gimmick, but it's one of those things where, and you or me or whoever the booker is has to see that. Does he have any potential? And I never saw any potential in him at all. It's like we talked about a little earlier, the maximum male models. They look great, but it doesn't trigger the imagination of the average fan. And if the guy don't have it, you can put him out there till the cows come home. He's still not going to sell you one ticket.
So, specifically in Bryan's case, what did you feel like he was lacking? Was it just... I don't know,
Everything.
because I know I thought he, even for like a built-up guy, I thought he had a very good look. But I don't remember a single interview he ever did, if he ever did one.
Well, a lot of guys have good looks. Take me, for example. No, a lot of guys look good in the ring, but he can't sell you a ticket. There's been not only one or two, they've been tons of them. And the average fan can tell you who drew money and who didn't, or who was interesting and who wasn't. That's why sometimes I used to have a joke in the dressing room. I says, I put a guy out there and he'd come back and I said, well, they had really liked you out there. They did? Who? I said, the concession stand. They sold more Cokes during that match than they sell at intermission. So next time I'm gonna have intermission and put you on right after it, so they really have a double intermission. They'll really like us then. But a lot of guys, you put them out there, they're big, they look great, but they just don't. I don't know. They just don't have it.
Do you remember Bryan as the Night Stalker in either WCW? Because he was also in Smoky Mountain Wrestling as well in some of the earlier days. I don't know if you've got any specific memories of Bryan then.
What was he in Smoky Mountain?
I thought he was still the Night Stalker there.
May have been. But he didn't turn the needle there. Of course, they didn't really push him. I think he just worked a couple of matches there. But when you try to push these guys and they don't produce, then you gotta get soured off of them real quick and put somebody else in there.
I'm just having a look now. Clark joined Wikipedia. I'm sorry. Clark joined Smoky Mountain Wrestling in October 1992 and made his debut on a show in Knoxville, losing to Smoky Mountain champion Bryan Lee by countout. He later defeated Tracy Smothers to become the promotion's second ever Beat the Champ TV champion. On February 2nd, 1993, he lost the title to Tim Horner 6 days later, and that's it. And he was in the WWF by 93. So
okay, here's Smoky Mountain. They are looking for somebody to turn that needle, and he won the title and then lost it 6 days later.
Yeah.
Well, that tells its own story.
Yeah. One day we're going to have to watch it's well known as one of the worst matches of all time, and that's the Night Stalker versus Sid. And that's I've written it here somewhere. Clash of the Champions 12. It's only 3 minutes 30, but it's meant to be an absolute howler.
I'm going to go look after it right when we quit here.
There we go.
I don't think I've seen it. It's the Night Stalker versus Sid.
Yeah. We can watch it here if you've got 3 minutes 30.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, just
is it 3 minutes and 30 seconds?
Bell to bell.
Let me watch it. But well, you've already advertised it now. Now we got to do it.
Yeah, sorry. All right, pausing.
What was this?
1990 or something? Let me just turn that down. Here we go. You can just tell me to skip or whenever you want me to. Sorry, everybody. There's another overlay here. It's WCW. There he is. He's walking out with the chopper. That's like Black Blood. There was a gimmick called Black Blood who was Billy Jack Haynes in the WCW for like a minute. I bet that was the same prop. Let me forward this on. Sid in red. There we go. So I don't know why this is so bad, so your guess is as good as mine. You a fan of the old Test of Strength, Dutch?
Oh yeah, that's a concession spot. Oh my God, this. Now wait a minute, who's the bad guy here?
I'm not sure. What the hell was that? He's gone.
Now the bear hug.
Yeah. You can see Bryan talking like incessantly in his ear there. Tell me when you've had enough, or I'll skip through a few. I'll skip through a few seconds if you want to.
Show me the finish.
That's goddamn. Oh my God, it's still going on, this bear hug.
Well, that's why it died. They're doing nothing.
There we go. I think we may have a minute of battle left here.
Okay, that's the first time Sid's went to his butt. He's went to a knee. Uh-oh, a punch. I think Sid is, yeah. Sid's like the baby face here.
Is he?
Because he's trying to do the selling.
Not.
No, the only way to go for Sid is back to the dressing room.
Is this? Hang on. Was Bryan actually trying to do like a nerve pinch, and now this guy's turned up? Who's he?
What is his name? I remember his
It's
name.
not Ice Train or something like that, is it?
No.
That's quite good. The Big Cat. Oh no, that's Mr. Hughes. Is that Mr. Hughes?
Maybe.
Oh my God, Paul. This is terrible.
Wait a minute, what? Terrible. It's not that good. That'd be an upgrade.
That fell apart within 4 seconds. That's probably why it got a -3.5 stars. Okay, we saw that. That wasn't even That wasn't even so good. It was funny or bad. It was funny.
That was. Okay, you'll hear from my lawyer next. Cruel and unusual and inhumane treatment.
That was shocking business. Listen, I think we should end the podcast now.
Oh my God!
It'll give you more chance for your lawyer to draft, a complaint against me.
And let me get my noose ready so I can go hang myself.
Dutch, go on. You do the plugs, for goodness sake. You do the plugs and then wrap up the podcast and we'll get out of here.
What am I plugging?
I don't know. Books or something, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Hey, I've written 2 books, World According to Dutch and Tales from a Dirt Road. And you can check on them by emailing me at Dirty Dutch Mantell with 2 L's at gmail.com. And we have T-shirts. If you look at the bio inside the link that's provided on YouTube, you people mean nothing to me. How much is that shirt?
Great question. It seems to fluctuate every single day I check it because it works on the dollar amount. I think it's $25, and then
okay.
And then, but the pound version fluctuates every single second according to what the dollar's doing. It's very confusing.
Yeah, that is confusing. And I've been, have you read that they're trying to get rid of the dollar?
No.
You haven't read that?
Is this something to do with
China?
Brazil and China. Is it something to do with that?
Something like that. I don't like when they do that. That would really upset the world's balance.
Yeah. Well, the World Bank works on dollars, so how are they going to just...
Well, I don't know. I'm sure it's not going to happen next week. But in 10 years, or I don't know, whatever they do. Also, talk about my books. If you want them autographs, you can write to me there, and I will put your name down, best wishes, enjoy... and I sign it in 2 names, Dirty Dutch and Zeb Coulter, We the People. So you get 2 signatures in that.
Where's the diplomas? We haven't plugged those in a while.
No, we haven't. Where are they? I don't know where they are.
Okay. Well, you can also get a diploma signed by Dutch and also the provost, Zeb Coulter.
That's right. You get 2 autographs there. It's the University of Dutch, a diploma that says you went through all the required regulations and studies, and you receive a PhD in the wrestling arts from the University of Dutch, stamped, and I sent it in a little like maroon pamphlet. It's just like getting a regular diploma ready to hang. Just put it in the frame, put it on the wall. So the next time somebody's arguing wrestling with you, you can say, where did you get your diploma in wrestling? And they can say, well, where did you get yours? And you can say, well, I got mine at the University of Dutch, and point it out on the wall. That shuts them up every time.
Mortarboard not included. Right, we're going to go, I'll use the same line I used on Kenny Boland. I'm hungry, so I'm shutting down this podcast. So, thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you again next week. And Dutch, we the people.
We the people.